back to another Jazz Drummer Q-Tip of the week. My name, of course, is Quincy Davis. Thank you so much for tuning in, especially my subscribers. I appreciate you, and I am so excited about this video because recently I've been doing a lot of reaction videos that I can tell you have been enjoying. But in this video, I'm going to be sharing a few techniques that I've been using on gigs recently to kind of capture that old school vintage 70s snare drum sound that I think are pretty effective. And I'm just really curious what you're going to prefer. Which one is your favorite sound? Which technique do you prefer? Before we jump in, I want to share a coupon code with you that you can use right now, which will give you a discount off of my Funk Play Along in my digital download store. So that code should be flashing right about now. So if you use it, you'll get a nice discount and you'll be funking up a storm. Also, I have a new ebook coming out very soon that will focus on modern day solo language and phrases. So you're definitely going to want to check that out when it comes out, which should be in the next couple weeks. All right, so I bet you're wondering, hey Q, which 5 techniques or ways are you going to be using to get that old school snare sound? Well, I'm glad you asked, because the first way is really high tech and it's really difficult to find this, but I think you'll be able to find a bed sheet. Simply a torn bed sheet that I'll place over the snare drum. Very easy, okay? So that's one way. And another way is from the company Big Fat Snare Drum, right? I'm not endorsing any of these companies, so I don't get paid if you purchase them. But this is a really cool thing because it's more cloth. And here is a magnet right here. You put it on the snare drum, and then it attaches to the snare drum using the magnet. So you can kind of do that, and it stays attached, which is really cool. And then we got another product from Big Fat Snare Drum, which I'm sure many of you have seen this, and that just simply works like so. Place it on the snare drum like that, right? And they have this little lift right here you can use to get it off the snare drum. And then, extremely high tech, just some paper. Place it on the snare drum. Boom. This is 5 sheets. You know, you can use different amounts, but 4 to 5, you start to notice an effect, a pretty cool effect. So I'll just place that on the snare drum. In the 5th high-tech way that I'm going to show you is I got to give a shout-out to my former student, Max Osawa, up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, for showing me this. This is simply cardboard that a drum head came in. So you simply cut it out in the shape of whatever drum you're placing it on, in this case, the snare drum, right? And there you go. And it fits perfectly. It won't come off because it's shaped to the drum. So that's a really cool technique, and you can just take it off like so. All right, so those are the 5 different ways that I'm going to be comparing to get an old school snare sound. So if you're ready, then I'm ready. Are you ready? Are you really ready? I always ask you, and you're like, I don't know, Q. I don't know if I'm ready. Well, you better be ready because this is going to be funky. If you're ready, then I'm ready. You're ready. I'm ready. Then you know what time it is. Let's go! All right, so now for the big reveal. I want you to let me know in the comments, based on sound, which one do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to let you know at the end of this video what my favorite is. All right, talking about the cardboard cutout, I really love the fact that it's easy to apply, super easy, and it's easy to remove. Boom. But I also like the fact that you get a lot of tone with the drum. So you get a lot of that tone, you get a lot of depth, you get a lot of, it sounds pretty full. It sounds like a deep snare drum. However, I don't love the extra ringing. And if you do close miking, that's definitely going to come through in the sound system if you do this, if you choose cardboard. Right? So maybe you would add a little extra muffling, but that kind of defeats the purpose to me. But I don't mind it that much. All right, and going to the big fat snare drum donut cutout. Again, this one is fitted to the drum, which is awesome for easy removal and easy application. Boom, done. Let's see how it sounds. Super dry compared to the cardboard. This is very dry. Therefore, you don't get a lot of extra ringiness. Ringiness. So that's really cool. However, you also don't get a lot of depth of sound and a lot of tone. So it's a trade-off. And depending on what you're going for, maybe that's your choice. The bed sheet. The bed sheet method. All right, let's see what this sounds like. By the way, application is not that difficult. It takes a little, finagling a little bit, but it's not terrible. Let's see what it sounds like. This one is also pretty dry, and not a lot of extra ringiness. And if you notice, this one's a little higher compared to the big fat snare drum. Just a little bit higher, right? And it's a little higher. It's a little harder to apply or to put on, and there's a chance of slippage, right? If you're really playing it. See, it's starting to slide. You probably can't see it, but it's starting to slide just a little bit. And after a while, I'm sure you would have to readjust. But generally, it will stay as long as you allow or you leave enough slack on the sides. I think the weight of the slack will keep it in place. So this is a pretty good sound, though. As long as you're not going for a deep, lower tone for your drum, I think this is a nice sound. All right, and the cloth version of the big fat snare drum with the magnet to keep it in place and to allow it to hang, which is really cool. So that's definitely a pro. Again, it's fitted, so you don't have to worry about it moving. Let's check the sound. Okay, so now we're getting more tone, we're getting more depth compared to the cloth, right? The bed sheet. You get some tone, you get a little bit of the ringiness that you got from the cardboard, but not nearly as much. And it is dry, right? So that's kind of the best of all the different aspects. The tone, you don't get too much ringiness. It's fitted to the drum. And the added plus, which none of the others can do, is that you can flip it on, flip it off, flip it on, which is kind of cool. All right, and then the last one, the sheet technique, the the paper technique. And this is 5-ply or 5 sheets, right? We can take one off and see what that sounds like. But first of all, just throwing it on the drum that's easy. The only thing with the sheets, one of the things is that it's probably not going to stay on the drum, especially if you use an angle, play with an angle like I do. Tone-wise, that's a pretty deep tone. It really kind of gives the impression that it's a deep drum. You do get some of the ringiness, but if you have some tone, if you want tone, you're going to get some ringiness. It's just how much of that compared to the actual depth and the tone of the drum are you getting. And to me, it's actually a good balance. And the only thing, like I said, is that the paper is probably it definitely will slide, because I've used this method, and after a while the paper starts to slide. You know, it starts to do this, so you got to kind of keep on readjusting. And the other con is that it starts to wear out, so you just, you can kind of see it, and I haven't even played on these that much. So let's see what 4 sheets of paper sounds like. So now, right now, it's interesting. You can hear more of the ringiness, right? And less of the tone. It's a little higher. Let's see what 3 sheets sounds like. And you're going to hear a big difference now. Right? So that's 3 sheets. And we could keep going, but I think you get the idea. So this is, again, 5 sheets, and this is what it sounds like. A little tricky to finagle and put on, but once it's on, it stays for a little while. You're going to have to readjust a little bit. All right, now it's time for me to let you know which one is my favorite. And it's tricky. It's tricky. But my favorite, as far as just flat out for tone, it's the cheapest method of all. Paper. Give me the paper all day. I feel like it gives the truest and most natural kind of old fat 70s snare drum sound. And it's pretty consistent regardless of the drum that you use it on. But I hate the fact that it keeps on moving. You can't kind of just put it on there and forget it. So you're going to have to keep on adjusting it. So for tone, I love the paper. For convenience, especially if I'm traveling, especially if I'm using it a lot, I'll go with the cloth. I like the cloth, the magnetic cloth. I think this kind of gets the best of all the different aspects of having something over the drum. You get some tone. It's dry. It's easy. You can just throw it on there. It's easy to pack. You can kind of throw it off to the side and then quickly put it back on. I think this would be let's call it a tie between the paper and the cloth. The cloth. I said cloth. There we go. And the cloth. All right, so that is today's video and my comparison of 5 techniques that I use to get that old school snare drum sound. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it helpful, and you know what to do. Until the next time, practice hard, but practice smart. Take care. Bye-bye.